it challenges the very core of what we've built our life on, which is comfort. And so no wonder people are resistant to it. And we see these children floating down a river, and you and I, Brett, are standing at the shore with our wives. We're going to go, oh my goodness, we got to get these kids out of the river. Foster care for us is not about getting a child for our family, but about giving our family to a child.
Your whole life can change by just saying yes. And that reality that will come from that will be a blessing to you, and it'll be the gospel at work. Welcome to the Brave Wisdom Podcast, and we're back with our guest, Mike Kraft, and we're going to unpack maybe this idea of radical hospitality, which I know is a theme in your life, Mike, and you've lived it out in a lot of tangible ways, both in the foster adoption space, but also in the ministry space and the way you do church and community. But I think it's a reflection literally of God's heart in the gospel. And so tell us, what's on your heart currently in this area?
When I think about hospitality and why do we welcome people, I think, first going back to this idea of stewardship and going, okay, ultimately my life, who does my life belong to? Does my life belong to me, or does my life belong to the Lord? And answering that fundamental question is so important, because I think some of us are like, oh yeah, my life belongs to God. But when we talk about the mission and the purpose of our life and our existence and what we're aiming for and working for and moving towards, who is it about? Is it about, hey, how can I leverage my life and everything that God has given me for his glory and for the sake of others, like Jesus lived his life? That's what Paul says in Philippians 2. Like he laid his life down for others. He made himself nothing. He was a humble servant and elevated others. And ultimately, like, that's this idea of hospitality is about the other and about the stranger and about serving those in need. And so that's essentially the heart of Jesus, and what he lived his life for is to be one of radical hospitality. And so my wife and I, when we got married and even in our dating relationship, just said, look, we want this to be something that we prioritize. We want to be one that are a couple and a family that our mission is to leverage everything we have for the glory of God and for the good of others. And we want to invite and include as many people into our family as we can along the way. And actually what's funny, Brett, you really sold me on Chat GPT. I've been a resistor, and I still have some issues with the premise of it. But I'm having a lot of fun with Chat.
Yeah.
And the other day I sat down and I was like, man, I wonder if I ask Chat the 10 most noble things someone can do with their life, what would it tell me? And so Chat and I had a little dialogue, but it came back and was like, spreading love and kindness was one of them. And I'll read just a couple. Making a lasting difference and impact in the lives of others. Serving those in need. Raising and nurturing a loving family. Cultivating a family. Standing up for justice and truth. Contributing to the betterment of humanity. Cultivating personal integrity and character, educating and empowering others, protecting and guarding the environment for future generations, and faithfully serving for a greater purpose. And so I read those things, and then I thought, okay, now Chat, take Micah 6:8. That oh man, what is good and what does the Lord require of you, but to do justice, to love kindness, and to walk humbly with God. To act, or another translation is to act justly, to love mercy, and to walk humbly with God. And it literally, Brett, it took those 10 most noble secular things and just dropped it right under the umbrella of acting justly, loving mercy, and walking humbly.
Yeah.
And I thought, man, God really knows what he's doing. And he doesn't give us the blueprint for life because he wants us to be miserable or follow these rules and guidelines. He gives us the blueprint for how to live life because he wants us to experience the true meaning and purpose of life and what life is really all about. And when we live just for ourselves, and just in the under the control, trying to control our life and our narrative, rather than saying, "Hey, we want to be obedient to Jesus," that's when we really get sucked into a lot of the lies of life, and pursuing these false narratives of wanting more, and ascribing to more materialism, and beliefs that we're going to experience satisfaction when that really doesn't satisfy us.
And I think you're right. For those that you know, when you mentioned the Chat GPT thing, I did a workshop with the team at a South Texas Alliance for Orphans, and how we can utilize this tool for clarity and communication, and for what you just did, for bringing about ideas and synthesizing something that, and bringing it back really to truth as well, which is what you did so beautifully with that kind of experiment. And I think you're right. There's so much truth in God's word that brings revelation to us in every moment. And I believe that's also the courage we have, that we can always turn to the word and find some sort of clarity. And that's why I think courage is what fuels radical focus. Now, you and your wife, when I observe you guys, I see a courageous couple. I see people that step into the unknown and say yes to the foster and adoption space, say yes to doing discipleship in the way that you do with your community and your church. And I just see you not run away from any issue that you face. And so I want to, number one, thank you for your courage, because it really propels me as well. But from the outside, foster and adoption, that particular space can seem overwhelming and uncertain. What gave you and Ariel the courage to take that leap and to do what you do every day?
First of all, that's very kind, and I definitely don't feel worthy of that. I am just so grateful for God's leading, and His grace to us. But I think back to like this theology and this understanding, and even like what you know the title of your podcast, Brave Wisdom, understanding God and God's heart and who He is. That God is a God of community, and He exists in the Father, Son, and Holy Spirit. And then He is a God of family, and He's the Father, and has invited us into His family, and He designed the family. And understanding that, man, this is God's plan and God's heart, is that we have a father in Him, but also we have an earthly father, and He started, the first family in the garden, and obviously we know what happened there and the fall, but God's plan and His heart is for belonging in family. Psalm 68:6 says that God places the lonely in families. And so for Ariel and I, when we got married, and Brett, there's so many topics that you and I could talk about. We had fertility issues and struggled to be able to have biological children, and that's a whole journey and story. But Ariel and I said, okay, we want to really press into this idea of family, and inviting and including people into our family, whoever needs it and whatever that might look like. So we've had people. We had a girl that was 27 years old live with us for a year and a half. We had another girl that was 29 who lived with us, and they both became the aunties to our kids. We've had a family, some of our closest friends, they have 6 children, including triplet boys. They lived with us for 8 months. And so it was like, hey, yeah, was it crazy? We had 14 of us living under one roof for a few months, or for 8 months. Yeah, it was crazy, but it was beautiful, and it was great. And saying, hey, we're going to really press into this idea of communal living and family. And then Ariel and I, several years ago, learned about children in crisis in San Antonio, and we have one of the highest rates of abused and neglected kids of anywhere in the country. We have kids that are being shipped out on buses because there's no homes for them to go to. And we said, look, like, we have a home, we have a family. Why not invite them and include them in our family for however long they need it? And foster care, when you say like, okay, tell me about foster care, I think and the reason I even brought up this idea of family. Foster care for us is not about getting a child for our family, but about giving our family to a child for however long they need it. And that's not just something that we've done in foster care. That's something that we do for the 72-year-old widow who has nobody. And we say, hey, we're your family, and we're going to wrap around you. That's something that we do for we want to do for everybody that's a part of our life. And to say, hey, you belong here. You belong with me. You're accepted, and that you are wanted, and that you're part of our family.
The other thing I've observed working with South Texas Alliance for Orphans is you guys have a real clear mission, but you also describe it in ways that was so fascinating to me because talk about river relationships and this idea that you don't just deal with one part of the crisis. You guys actually prevent, provide, and protect. And I know also you can also tangent to the way of what you and your wife are doing this year that is new for the Alliance as well.
Yeah, I think the thing that's so important for us is understanding, okay, back to what we said earlier, like what is the purpose of my life? And the purpose of my life is that, man, I exist to worship God and to bring him glory in all things, and that I'm a steward of everything that he's given me. And here's the reality: we're not all going to do the same thing, but we all can do something. And so things are going to play out very differently for Brett and Leslie Owen as they are for Mike and Ariel
Yeah.
Kraft, or however this is going to look. And so this is this is not necessarily prescription, but description for listeners and for people to say, hey, what is God going to lead me to? But when it comes to saying, hey, we believe that everybody needs to experience family and everybody needs to be supported by the church and the body of Christ. And that's a powerful, like the family is not just a metaphor, it is a metaphor, but it's a reality of what we're able to experience. And even just about that, man, I've had people tell me within our church body that have said, Mike, can you please not call us a family? And I said, what do you mean? And I said, why not? They said, well, you can't even begin to understand the pain that my family has caused me. And my family is so jacked up and they have messed with me and abused me that the last thing I want is another family. I don't want another one of those. I'll take some friends. I'll have a church, but I don't want a family. Don't use that word around me. And that's so sad because I believe that God's body, the church, is a family, and it is to be a redemptive space and place for and a redemptive people, not just the church isn't a place, but a redemptive people, and that they're allowed to experience these redemptive relationships, and because of Jesus and what he's done. And so when we ask about river relationships, it kind of comes from this illustration of saying, hey, if people are floating down a river and we see these children floating down a river and you and I, Brett, are standing at the shore with our wives, we're going to go, oh my goodness, we got to get these kids out of the river. And so Leslie, you're going to jump in and you're going to start pulling these kids out. And then Ariel, you're going to run upstream and you're going to go figure out why are these kids getting in the river. And Brett, you're going to go downstream and you're going to help these kids that we've missed. That's the analogy. And so we say, hey, at the beginning of the river, we want to prevent fracture. We want to keep these families together. And how do we wrap around these families? We have something called the Alliance Prevention Network that helps local churches partner with CPS, the Department of Child Protective Services, to connect with families in need. So if a family needs beds or window units or clothes for their children so that they can get their children back, or a grandma is going to get these kids and needs these supplies, the materials are given by the local church, and that church connects with the family in hopes that that family can stay together. And the point isn't just to be a delivery service, but to have a relationship with them.
On that note, I remember tell the story of the pillow, the little boy who just was so excited about a pillow.
We brought beds over to actually, matter of fact, it's like 3 minutes away from my house, like right down
Oh
the street.
my, yeah,
And we got this delivery. There were some bunk beds. A grandma got 5 grandkids. And so
wow,
we go and set up the bunk beds, and then we brought in the sheets and I carried the pillows in. And I had a pillow that had a blue pillowcase on it. This little boy runs up to me, rips the pillow out of my hand, and he goes, holds it up like it's, $1 million. And he runs around the house and he's like, I have a pillow. I have a pillow. And he's
yeah.
right down the street.
We're living our lives, and these individuals and these children are living next door.
And here's the reality, Brett, and not to say anything, negative, but those families and those kids, they will never go into a church.
Yeah.
So the church, this platform allows the church to go to them and to be the church and to wrap around them in relationship. And then we talk about providing capacity, and we need foster families. We're short about 500 foster families. I got a phone call last May from our agency saying, "Hey, Mike, we know you have one spot. We're about to send these group of little girls to El Paso. Can you take one of them, because you can only have 6 kids in your home in Texas, and we had 5, and so." We ended up saying yes, but they were driving these kids 8 hours away, 500 miles away, because there's no homes here.
Mm.
And just to be real and straight up, it is discouraging that we have to try to convince the people of God to wrap around these kids.
What's the statistic you said? Like, if every church in San Antonio just had one foster family,
Yeah,
half
half of a foster family. Shoot.
we would end the crisis tomorrow. Like, to me, and this is how my brain works, and I look at these things and I'm like, why? Like, what is stopping us?
Yeah, I think education is a part of it. To be honest with you, Brett, and you can edit this out if you want, bro.
No, go.
But I hear people a lot of times talk about the culture, and like, oh, the culture is threatening the church, and we have all these cultural issues, and the church is bowing down, and we're going to stand on the truth, and we're not going to, the culture is the greatest threat to the American church. And while I believe that, yes, hey, we have to stand up for the truth of the Word of God and not bow down to what is popular opinion 100%. I don't think that's the greatest threat to the American church. I believe the greatest threat to the American church is our comfort and clinging to the idol of comfort. And here's the reality. We build our churches on this idea of, man, we're going to sing songs that people like, and they like the style of music. We're going to have a guy that's engaging, that is going to entertain people, and we're going to have hot coffee, and we're going to have a nice building that keep people comfortable. And it's this idea of consumerism. And when people don't like what a local church offers, then they go to another church that has better programs for their children. And we teach them that this is what it means to be a follower of Jesus. And so when we say, hey, I want you to do something that's hard, I want you to do something that you're not in control of, that you actually have to, it's extremely uncomfortable when you step into this really hard mess and invite another children into your home, or you go be with another family that's deeply hurting and struggling, or you go and you help support a kid that's aging out of foster care. It challenges the very core of what we've built our life on, which is comfort. And so no wonder people are resistant to it. This is something that I say in the mirror as well, because I'm so hardwired to protect myself and to do what I want to do, and to make sure that, oh man, I'm not going to do that. I don't have time for that. I don't have, what if this relationship goes south, or what if we bring this person into our life and it goes sideways, and then it ruins what we've built. Here's the deal. Like the gospel, and this is what Tim Keller does such a great job of talking about, but he talks about, like, hey, the cultural narrative says, live for yourself, build your own castle. And then, man, when hard things come, we insulate and we isolate and we protect it. And what the gospel says, hey, look, life isn't about ourselves. It's about laying our life down and following Jesus and worshiping him and bringing him glory and serving others. And when hard things come, we don't insulate and isolate. We incarnate and wrap ourselves around the brokenness like Jesus has done for us. And that's the war. And so when James, it says, hey, don't become polluted by the world, that's what he's saying, is there's this way of thinking, and the world says, hey, it's about you and your comfort and elevating yourself. And the gospel says, hey, it's about laying yourself down. And whoever wants to be great among you must first become a servant of all, like Jesus.
And continuing the river, I know this illustration well. I actually made the graphic and working with Jennifer and the team. And I remember just on that graphic idea, when I first made it, I put the kids in boats, and she's like, no, they don't have a boat. And then I think the next one I made life jackets. She's like, no, they don't have a life jacket. And so if you see the graphic, I'll put it up on the screen for those watching the video. They're literally in the river with nothing. And that's what you're describing, is these kids and these families are drowning, and they're drowning in this turmoil and trauma and abuse and neglect. But then there's the end of the river, and it's literally a waterfall. and there are these hands reaching out. And I know from being around you and knowing your heart, those are the kids that are aging out of the system.
Yeah.
And there are a huge population of these young adults. And I believe what I have seen and what I'm most excited about in 2025 is that you and Ariel and the Alliance for Orphans has a dedicated program to serve that demographic of young adults. Tell me about it.
Yeah, well, major props to my wife, and actually, I mean, the Lord has just really laid this population on her heart, and to the point of, I mean, almost making her miserable. Like, she keeps her up at night because these kids that age out of foster care, meaning that they turn 18, they get a check from the state and basically say, "Hey, good luck," and they have no support. And what ends up happening to them is 97% end up in severe poverty or even worse. 76% of sex traffic victims come out of foster care. This is where these kids are going.
Mm.
And 45% of the homeless population spent time in foster care. A boy that ages out of foster care has an 81% chance of being incarcerated within the first year. And these girls, at a very high rate, get pregnant again. And so it's just absolutely tragic, and the results are devastating. And we found out about this organization called Connections Homes that started in Georgia that matches mentor families with kids aging out of foster care. And so my wife said, "Hey, look, we need to have this in San Antonio." And the whole premise is that Psalm 68:6 says God places the lonely in families. We all need family. We need to belong in family. And these mentor families, they don't the youth don't live with them. The youth doesn't have they're not financially responsible for them in any way, but they wrap around them with support that a parent would for their adult child, and say, "Hey, we're going to have game nights on Fridays. Come be a part of that. Hey, we're going to go to the UTSA football game or a Spurs game, and we're going to get you a ticket, and you're going to go with us. Hey, you're going to come over for Thanksgiving. We're going to get you Christmas presents. We're going to," and so it's becoming a support family for these kids that have none, and the results are amazing. I mean, it's incredible what ends up happening. That less than 1% of these boys that have been matched, and there's over like 500 or 600 different matches. Less than 1% have a run in with the law. Um, it's like 98% of the girls don't get pregnant. I mean, it's just
Wow.
crazy. Not
Incredible.
one had been trafficked. And
Yeah.
it's wild to see, because this is God's design, is for the family and wrapping around these kids. And so when she said we needed this in San Antonio, we believed it, but I don't think either of us knew how badly we need this. There's 1,200 kids in the state of Texas every year that age out of foster care. Over 600 of them are in San Antonio. And so
Wow.
over half of the kids in Texas, which is obviously a really big state, are here, and they don't have support. And so the Don't Go Alone program matches mentor families with these youth, and the results are incredible. And 53% of these kids end up going on to college or trade school. And when 3% without a family support go on to college or trade school. And so it's just amazing what happens. But we've decided as a family, hey, this is what a population we're really going to serve. And so we had a young lady who was 21 years old, came over for dinner, and aged out of foster care and is going to college, and really sweet girl. And so Ariel walked her around the house and showed her. My wife is like obsessed with plants, and so the girl was asking about her plants, and
Yeah.
takes her upstairs and shows her all the different plants. And we get to the end of the night, and Ariel's talking about plants, and she says to us, "Hey, I just want to thank you for coming over, or allowing me to come over." We said, "Hey, thank you for coming over. This was great." And she said, I need to tell you something." And we said, "Sure, what's that?" And she said, "This is the first time in my life that I have ever sat down at a table for dinner
Wow.
with a mom and a dad at the table." 21 years old,
Hmm.
has never sat at a table with a mother and a father figure.
Hmm.
And then she started crying. And she was like, I don't even know
So
how to
good.
say
So
thank
good.
you. She's never seen a family before. That blew my mind. Like,
Yeah.
blew my mind. Had never been at a table with a mother and father. Another young lady that we're connecting with, he came over, and we got her a bunch of Christmas presents actually through the Jingle Mart efforts of the Alliance and my guy Vinny Vanzetta at Ken's Five. And so she came over and we got her a bunch of these Christmas presents, and she sat down and unwrapped them. And she turned to my daughter and said, my daughter's 13, and she said, I don't know the last time that I've opened a present
Mm.
was. And it's so crazy, Brett, that these kids don't have family support, and that's
Wow.
what they need. God doesn't say, hey, the Lord places the lonely in schools or in shelters or in church groups, he places them in families.
Come on.
And that's his design. And so we encourage everybody. Again, we're not all going to do the same thing, but we can all do something. And this is where the body of Christ needs to jump in and say, hey, we're going to be involved in being the solution, in inviting others into family, no matter or regardless of what that looks like.
Mike, you said it so beautifully. And I love that. I know the theme of this year for the Alliance are these river relationships. And so if you're listening today, as Mike even went through the river, there are so many ways to get involved. That's what I love about the Alliance. I love big, big ideas. And let me tell you, those listening, if you haven't visited Alliance for Orphans, this is number 4orphans.org. Go check it out because it's an incredible website, and we've put a lot of work into it as a team. But more importantly, we do it because of you. We want to speak to you, the individual, the church, the family, the businesses, to get involved because everyone can play their piece. And so this latest effort, Don't Go Alone, mentoring, matching, the kids have the empowered choice to choose the family, which is a brilliant approach to these kids, giving them their power to be able to choose as well, the choice and the ability to connect with people that they want to have a relationship with. It's such a beautiful program. If you're listening today and you want to get involved, head over to alliancefororphans.org and get ready because your whole life can change by just saying yes to any of their events, their info meetings that happen monthly, getting involved. If you're a pastor that listens, they have pastor gatherings. But I just want to encourage those who are listening. This is the Brave Wisdom Podcast. You've heard the wisdom and the courage of someone like Mike, and I hope it propels you to have renewed focus in your life because the things that he talked about today may be tugging on your heart right now. And all you got to do is say yes. Say yes, and I promise you, you direct your aim and you get focus. People like Mike are going to encounter you. People like Jennifer and Jocelyn and the entire team will walk alongside of you. And that aim and that reality that will come from that will be a blessing to you. And it'll be the gospel at work. Mike, I want to thank you again for hanging on for 2 episodes.
Thanks, man. Thanks for having me, Brett.
Please connect with Mike. You can find him online. If you Google him, he's got news articles, blog posts, things that he's done and be a part of. So he's easy to find and he's real connectable, both on social media. But hey, man, he'll have a cup of coffee with you and connect with you and your church and things like that as well. That's his job. So please connect with Mike. Please go to Alliance for Orphans. Until next time, this is the Brave Wisdom Podcast. We'll see ya.